Uh-oh. Am I still live? Can you still hear me and see me? Gotta keep my instrument hydrated, all of that. Is it better? Is the quality better? Less spinning. Thanks for noticing, Mark. I don't know if I want that one on or not. Okay. So I think, if I think it's ready to go. I got 1,000 bright lights. You can skip that, Mark. I will write you a note. Don't worry. I got it. Yep. I know. I have needs, Mark. Okay. Lori, I assume you are ready because you are always ready, but are you ready? Let me get the URL here. Make with the tweeting. Okay, Twitter, you go away. Go away. Okay, don't need that. We'll keep that over there. The chat over there. My notes over there. I have so many things that I want right in front of me. I don't know which ones to choose. My web browser. Come here. Come here. There you go. You go over there. Okay. Chat room, are you ready? I'm ready. My lights are ready. My internet connection is ready. Oh, stretch. Okay. I thought I had. That is what? What? Too many tabs open. Okay, I'm gonna need to do that later today. Well, that's. I'll take what I can get, Mark. Okay, Lori, get your stopwatch ready. Do the thing. Okay, counting down. 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast number 394, recorded live Wednesday, July 11th, 2018. So as you'll notice, there is 100% less Shane this week and 100% more Todd. That is no extra charge for you guys out there. The cost has not gone up for this podcast, though I think we both know that the quality will go up. I apologize for last week with Shane and Jonathan. Shane and I were going over the schedule for the summer this week. I don't think Shane and I are going to be in the same podcast at the same time for quite a while. It looks like September of maybe 2019 with travel for work and vacations and things like that. So I think it's just me this week and maybe just him next week. I don't know, but we're trying to work it all out. But this week it is only me. Back to the good old days when we first started this. Ollie in the chat room is saying, "Is Shane out tending to his cows?" Yes, he is out in the field, cowboying it up. Anybody who knows Shane knows that he would not last 2 seconds with actual manual labor in a field. So that's kind of funny with the hat, and it'd be like the movie City Slickers, but hopefully with fewer live births. But anyway, today is all me. You guys are lucky. We will start with some great news. So I was not on, we didn't have a podcast last week because it was 4th of July, Independence Day here in the United States. So we were all barbecuing and trying not to blow our fingers off with fireworks and things like that. The week before was Shane and Jonathan. And on July 1st, Microsoft announced all of the MVP renewals, and I am happy to have been in that group. So I have been renewed as a Microsoft MVP for another year. And this is like 13 years, 14 years. I forget exactly how they count that, 12 years, something like that. But it's I'm very excited about it. I always get nervous. My renewal date has always been July 1st. And so starting in May or so, I get a little nervous, and then I'm not going to get renewed, but July 1st, I got the email. Very excited about that. So thanks to all the people. I couldn't do that without you folks putting up with me. I couldn't do it without you folks inviting me to SharePoint Saturday events and all the other things that I do out in the community. So thank you very much for this. I do appreciate all that. So you're stuck with me for at least another year. And then they also announced some changes to the MVP program yesterday. So this is hot off the presses. They've kind of jiggled around again how they're naming things and what categories people in that are under. When I initially became an MVP back in 2006, I believe, I was a Windows SharePoint Services MVP. And then obviously that product went away, so there was no use for that. And it's kind of evolved over the years. Now I believe I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP. I forget. I will probably continue to be lazy and call myself a SharePoint MVP, but you guys know what I'm talking about. But if you see other MVPs in the community and they've got new titles and all that, the whole program has changed. I would put a link to it in here, but I forgot. So Lori, if you see the blog post, link it up in the notes and throw it in the chat for me, please. Yeah, but all great stuff for the MVP program. And thank you to Microsoft for putting up with me for as long as you have. On to more things that I've done and kind of some stuff that works into that. A couple of weeks ago, I think starting in July, I started writing regularly for Petri.com, and that is the website that Paul Thurrott and Brad Sams and Tony Redmond and a bunch of those folks write for. I've known those guys for a while, and a couple of years ago, I wrote some articles for them and didn't stick with it like I wish I would have. And so I was talking to Brad a month or two ago, and he's like, I'm willing to give you a second chance, you big dope. So the plan now is for me to write one article a week for Petri, and it's not going to be super complicated stuff. As he put, we're not trying to solve world hunger or anything like that, but it's going to be some SharePoint, mostly SharePoint server on-prem kind of content. So the article that I put out last week was called 5 Things You Can Do to Prep Yourself for the SharePoint 2019 release. And so that was a couple of things. So Brad was saying that they've been getting a lot of questions about SharePoint 2019, but there's really not much to say because it's not out yet. So between that and the fact that the internet loves lists, they love lists even more than they love funny cat videos. And so I went ahead and combined those two things. I took the chocolate and the peanut butter and mixed it up and got that. So that was last week's article. And then this week I decided to take those 5 things and go a little deeper with them. So this week's article was kind of the first thing that I mentioned you can do in last week's article, is just how to get a better idea of what your farm looks like before you upgrade it. So the idea of this series of articles is for on-prem administrators who are anxious to get to SharePoint 2019 but can't do it right now because it's not out, and honestly you wouldn't put it out right away anyway. And so what can you do with all that nervous, anxious energy while you're waiting patiently, hopefully, for months for SharePoint 2019 to come out? So that's what these articles, this series of articles, is going to be about. So I go out to Petri.com, that is Petri.com, and read those articles. Give me lots of thumbs up and stars and kudos and whatever it is that they do on that site. Leave me comments. I try to go out there and read those comments, but I don't know if I get alerts when someone leaves a comment or not, but trying to be out there. And there's just a bunch of great content out there. Petri is a great site. They get a lot of fun things. And it's not just Office, it's Microsoft technology. So the new Surface Go was announced a couple of days ago. They've got some stuff about that. It's a good place. And it's a place that I'm excited to be associated with. They're good folks. They're a lot of fun, and glad to be going there. So please go out there, give my articles lots of love and hits and all of that. So again, we haven't had a podcast for I haven't been on a podcast for like 3 weeks, and just so many things have come out, even though it's been a holiday weekend and all that. And today I will mostly be talking about some of the things that have come out over the last 3 weeks that I've been waiting to talk to you folks about, but just haven't had the time or been busy, celebrating independence. I also saw Hamilton last week, like on Thursday, so on the 5th of July. So it was all very appropriate that, the 4th of July was Independence Day, the 5th was Hamilton. Got to see that. Unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know about Hamilton. It is a musical based on the life of Alexander Hamilton, but it's set to hip-hop, rap type music and all of that. We saw it here in Des Moines, so it's not the original Broadway touring company. It's not, Lin-Manuel and all those folks. It was still pretty good. I loved every minute of it. I will say I've been to that venue in Des Moines a bunch of times to watch shows. It's really important if you go to see Hamilton to be sitting someplace where you can hear very well. They move the dialogue along quickly. If you're not paying attention, you'll miss some stuff. But back to this. So a bunch of things have come out in the last 3 weeks that I haven't had a chance to talk about. And one of them was a page diagnostic tool for SharePoint Online. This is a tool that Microsoft has put out. It's at support.office.com. The link will be in the show notes below, and it's in the chat room right now. But this is a tool that you can use for free that Microsoft has provided to let you analyze your classic pages in SharePoint, classic pages, classic team sites in SharePoint Online, and gives you a bunch of diagnostic information about this. So this is kind of a tool that can do many things for you. It's just a good checkup to look and see how things are going. I don't think anybody has ever heard from their end users, SharePoint is too fast. So using this tool, even though you're not getting any complaints, using it just to kind of see how the page return breaks down and how many database calls you have and if whether you're using CDNs or not and all that. This tool is pretty easy to use and just gives a bunch of good information about your page. So there might be some little things that you can tighten up and make your pages load a little faster for your end users. But it also is a good tool to use if there are problems, if things are broken, because then you can see that database calls are taking a long time. It gives you the correlation ID. So if you're using your support system with Microsoft and then you need a correlation ID to track something on the back end, this is a good way to get your correlation ID in SharePoint Online. It reminds me a lot of the Fiddler tool that I've used forever on-prem. It's the same kind of thing, but it bolts into SharePoint Online. And it gives you things like page load time, network latency, database things, and all that. So check out this page diagnostics tool. Again, it's only for SharePoint Online, though if you're doing SharePoint on-prem, tools like Fiddler are a great tool for that. And this is one of those things, I'm not a dev, so I don't write anything that does database calls. I don't write anything that does web calls. I'm not a developer or I don't do any kind of branding, so I'm not putting images or anything like that on a page. But looking at Fiddler or the output of something like this is a great way for folks that are admins to see what is going on in a page, because one of the great values of SharePoint is that anybody can do these kind of things. Anybody can easily drop an image on a page and customize a page, or drop a search web part on a page or something, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it the right way. So tools like this can expose some of those problems. This also has like a best practices thing. So it will tell you, hey, you're not using a CDN, but you could be using one. So even if this isn't your bag, it isn't the thing that you do, it still has value to you to run this tool and kind of see how the sausage is made, see how the things go in the background. I've learned so much about SharePoint and the bad things that people do to it over the years by using a tool like Fiddler. And so I was excited to see this one when I discovered it here a couple of weeks ago. Continuing in the trend of Microsoft releasing cool things, one of my other loves besides SharePoint and PowerShell and SQL and M&Ms and all the other things that I love is I love OneDrive. I love OneDrive Consumer. I love OneDrive for Business. I loved it when it was SkyDrive. And so that team has been kicking it for a couple of years now, 2.5, 3 years. They've just been knocking it out of the park. And they announced another good one here a couple of weeks ago. For quite a while, you have been able to remap the known folders in Windows to OneDrive. So the known folders are things like, my documents, my videos, my pictures, all that. For quite a while, you've been able to go into Windows and remap those locations from just C whatever to OneDrive. The value of that is whatever work you do on your machine is automatically synced up to OneDrive. And then it's already backed up. If your machine crashes, you've already got that content someplace else, but you can then get to it from the cloud, from your tablet, from your phone. If you install another machine and you make the same setting, then all of your documents and all of your pictures and videos and stuff are magically there. It's a pretty great piece of functionality. But it had one glaring problem. If you didn't do that right away, all it did was change the pointer. And so the other location where your documents and photos and all that had been still existed and still had stuff in it. You just didn't see it anymore because when you went into Explorer and did My Pictures, you went to the new pictures in OneDrive, not the old pictures on your C drive. For folks like us, not a big deal. We understand how that works and we know the thing and we don't get freaked out because our pictures are missing. But for regular end users, they don't care about that. They've got real jobs to worry about, and they don't know to move it, and they don't know why stuff isn't there. So a couple of weeks ago, Microsoft released a tool called the Known Folder Move, or the KFM. Sounds like a German industrial band. So the KFM kind of takes those two things and molds them together. It remaps the pointer for those known folders from local storage to OneDrive, but then it moves that content to OneDrive when it does it. So it's kind of the best of all worlds. That's an Office 365 thing that is rolling out now. So we're July 11th right now. The article that they published on Tech Community said it should be rolled out to all tenants and all people by the end of this month. So if you don't have it yet, it should be rolling out. The other great thing is this is essentially OneDrive for business. So this is the business side, not the consumer side. So they think about us admins when they do this. So there are GPOs around this. You can control this from an IT level. You can push it out. You can push settings out. You can restrict it. You can force it. All of those things. So if you're an IT pro and you're using SharePoint Online or going to be using SharePoint Online and know that OneDrive is an important part of that, definitely take a look at this and see what, play with it with your IT team for a while and try this tool. It's a really great tool. One thing, so there's kind of a when migrating from on-prem to Office 365 in the cloud, there's sort of some real obvious progressions that this makes. And I'm working with a customer now that's on-prem, but we're looking at Office 365 for them. And this kind of thing is part of that gradual move to the cloud. So before you can really do anything, if you've got on-prem things, we're talking on-prem SharePoint and Exchange and all of that, you have to get your identity piece in place. Even though you don't want to do identity, that's not your thing. You're a SharePoint person, you're an Exchange person. Identity is always the first thing that happens. So that's the Azure AD Connect piece. I've talked about that a bunch lately. That's one of my favorite pieces of Office 365. Get that in place. Normally, the first application that gets installed after that is in place is Exchange. That's the obvious win. You can start moving mailboxes from on-prem Exchange to Exchange Online. So that's kind of the second step in the evolution to online. The next stage that I normally have folks do is OneDrive and OneDrive for Business. And that's why this tool is very handy, because they can ease that third step. So that gets them, email's already out in the cloud, but end users don't care about that. They don't know about that. Other than now, it's way easier to get it on their phone. But now with OneDrive for Business and you've got your SharePoint Online licenses, now they can start playing with that and moving things out there. Now get to that on their phones. So this, while it seems like a nice to have, if you're, architecting out your cloud deployment, this is the kind of tool that's going to ease that road for you, because it helps you with one of the primary pieces of that move out there, that third piece, OneDrive. Once you get your users comfortable with OneDrive and get them used to that interface and going out there, then it becomes very easy to drop in other SharePoint Online sites, team sites, things like that. But OneDrive is a good one, because if they screw that up or get confused or whatever, it's not the end of the world. It's not important business things. So this is a great tool. Microsoft has done a really good job identifying the pain points in migration and hybrid and dropping these tools in. And this was another big win for them. So kudos to the OneDrive team for this. Another thing that came out, and I forget what date it came out. Let me move all my stuff. I have many windows competing for my attention. Okay, so this was last month in June. But a new version of the SharePoint Online management shell, so PowerShell for SharePoint Online, came out last month. And we're at version 16.0, 7813. Now, those of you that have been listening to my PowerShell talks for many years and my Office 365 and SharePoint Online talks for many years know I mock the SPO management shell heartily, and I think we would all agree that it has earned every bit of ridicule that I have thrust upon it. I will say in the last 6 months to a year, I've kind of toned that down a little bit because they have started adding more commandlets and more meat to this. It's definitely an integral part of your toolbox as an administrator. You have to know PowerShell. You have to know PowerShell for everything, for Windows, for SharePoint on-prem, for Azure AD, for AD, and SPO, all that. So you have to have it. You don't have the luxury of ignoring it. But the tool has been pretty weak recently, until like a year or so ago. And so every time a new version comes out, I do I install it and I do a get command before and after. And I remember this came out again 3 weeks ago. I remember they added some new commandlets to this one that I thought were important. I think Teams related, either Teams or groups related, I forget. And I remember looking at that and comparing the two sets of commandlets and thinking, wow, this is important stuff. I should tell people about this. But I didn't write down what was important about it, so I don't have it in my notes. And I actually created text files, but I didn't save them on OneDrive, and I did it on other machines, so I can't get to them. I'm just a big mess. But the story at the end is if you've got the SPO management shell commandlets installed, update them if you're not already running at 7813. And if you don't have them, now's a good time to go out and download them and get that thing. But I think it was Teams and groups that were the big pieces. They don't do any kind of change log or anything, so I can't tell by looking at the website. But also all good stuff. Similar to that, I stumbled across an article that explains a problem I'd had with another customer. So I've got another customer and they are moving into SharePoint Online, and they don't have SharePoint on-prem. They've got a lot of file shares and things like that, but they don't have the background knowledge and all of this and the foundation for SharePoint that I have, having dealt with SharePoint on-prem for as many years as I have. And the person that I'm working with is it's fun. So I get a lot of these. So normally when I get these gigs and I'm like, oh, somebody who doesn't know SharePoint, I'm expecting a lot of the same easy questions because there's a really difficult learning curve when it comes to SharePoint Online. And so there's kind of a bunch of questions that I always get, and they're pretty easy. I've been answering the same questions for a long time. This user is not like that. This person that I've been working with, she is asking way smarter questions, way tougher questions, really keeping me on my toes. And she is very security conscious, and so has really been holding my feet to the fire on how information is exposed, how it's shared, what the risk vector or the attack vectors are, things like that. And one of the things we spent a couple hours on last week was talking about groups and how to manage groups. And again, she didn't have the same background that I normally work with people having. And so this idea of groups in Office 365 and Azure was very confusing to her because, well, it's very confusing because there are multiple places to create groups. There are multiple kinds of groups, and it's not entirely obvious which is which because it is constantly moving. So the discussions that she and I had a couple of months ago about groups are not exactly the same as they are now because Microsoft's been constantly improving the product. And one of the concerns that she had was there is different behavior for a group depending on where you create the group. You can create an Office 365, well, you can create a group in Azure Active Directory. You can create a group that is an Office 365 group in Azure Active Directory. But when you do, as of today or as of last week when her and I were doing it, it doesn't behave exactly the same as if you create it in Office 365. And so I was explaining to her that in the background, there's a lot of syncing and things aren't one object like we would hope they would be. and was kind of working with that. And so one of the articles that I came up with for her is a month or so old, and it is about how to use PowerShell with Azure Active Directory to set up the default group types and kind of make sure that those things all look the same inside of Office 365. And this is just one of those things that we're just kind of having to slog through as Microsoft keeps bolting things together, making the group's experience better, as some of these things, the sands underneath our feet are kind of shifting. But this is one that was good to have because number one, it was the fix to the problem that she was having, but number two, it also explained the problem in a little different way than I had explained it. So she was able to hear it this way and hear it that way, and so that was helpful to see that. So that's just one of those things. Read through it. You may not have to use it, but it's good to know what the PowerShell is, what the problem it's trying to solve is. So I thought I would share that one with you all. My printer has decided to join in. It's not actually going to print anything. It's just going to make a bunch of noise during my podcasts. A couple of months or so ago, or maybe a month or so ago, I published a blog post on how to use PowerShell to resolve short URLs. And this is one of those things, when I talked about it, there's a bunch of URL shorteners that we have to have because the internet just requires it. And I wrote some PowerShell because I don't trust what's behind it. And I hate looking at a bit.ly link or a t.co link and not knowing what's behind there. I'm afraid to click them anymore. And so I wanted some way to resolve that. And bit.ly has a way to resolve some links, and Twitter has a way, but I wanted one tool. So I wrote a PowerShell command where you throw the short URL and it would spit back the URL that it actually takes you to, so you know whether it's a safe link or not. So Jeff Hicks, who is a listener of this program and a PowerShell expert, took that and wrote a much better way to do it. Or as I like to think of this bit, anything I can do, Jeff can do better. He can do anything better than me. So he cleaned up the PowerShell, and then he made a form out of it. So now you can have this form where you paste in a short URL and it gives you back the long URL. And Jeff just does a bunch of better stuff than I do. So anytime he can improve upon some crap I put out there, I like to give him some props for that. So you can go his website if you don't already have it bookmarked. Shame on you. jdhitsolutions.com, and it's Jeff Hicks. Yeah, and so Mark in the chat room is, he might be saying this because I think Jeff is local to you guys. You're both up in that Rochester area. But yeah, so Jeff Hicks has just got all kinds of great PowerShell stuff. And again, you can't do anything with Microsoft products these days without knowing PowerShell. So just reading through his blog, he does a really good job of, again, seeing stuff that I write that is specific to whatever Microsoft product I'm working with. I know my product well. I don't know PowerShell as well, so I cobble something together. He knows PowerShell well, so he's able to look at the thing that I'm trying to do and show the right way to actually do it. So it's good stuff. So thanks to Jeff for that. I'll read that up and see which of our approaches suits your needs better. Another thing that came out that Microsoft announced here a couple of weeks ago in my backlog of links that I know you podcast listeners would love to hear about. So this one came out on July 2nd, so that's not too bad. Bill Bear from the product team put this one out, and this is the idle session timeout policy for SharePoint Online and OneDrive. They have made that generally available now. So this is the ability to control how long your authentication lasts against an Office 365 or SharePoint Online session in the browser. This is one I have not had to work in an environment where this was necessary, so I'm not sure how well it meets the needs of the people who have these needs or not. But basically, you can set it to warn or terminate sessions, authentication sessions, based on time periods. So you might be in a highly secure environment where you don't want people walking away from a browser and somebody else sneaking in behind them and mucking up bank transactions or something like this. So the SharePoint Online Management Shell, which probably is one of the things that got added in that last bit, has now a commandlet for that, SPO browser idle sign out, and you can set warnings and sign outs, and it will sign users out if they're idle for too long. So again, a good security thing. Now there are some caveats to this. because there are signals that the browser, that the page has to give back to the back end to let it know whether people are idle or not. And so when you read this article, it's on techcommunity.microsoft.com. Read through all the way at the bottom. They talk about some of the things that might sneak up on you and might grab you on that. So check that out. I would be curious to hear from anybody whether that's a valuable thing, what needed to be met, and whether this tool particularly read it. I see where they're going with it. I like what they're trying to do, but I can't think of any situation that I've had recently where this would have been the solution to the problem. So I'm curious how well it works for people in real life. Another tool that Bill announced, this one, same day. Bill was busy July 2nd, probably getting a lot of work done. It's the beginning of Microsoft's fiscal year is July 1st, so I'm glad to see Bill hit the ground running. Always a hard worker, Bill Bear. This is one that I really do like, that I think is very impressive. So I think it was last year at Ignite, maybe the year before at Ignite, I forget. Microsoft announced the SharePoint migration tool. So this was a free tool that you could use to migrate to SharePoint Online, and it lets you migrate from file shares and SharePoint on-prem and a bunch of other things. And it's a good tool. The price is right. It's free, and it's included with your licensing. It is a very basic tool, so for basic environments and basic chunks of content, it works pretty well, but it falls down in a bunch of other spots. So we're still going to need tools like ShareGate for big migrations. But I do talk, when I do the migration sessions at conferences, I talk about how you don't have to have one migration method for your entire corpus of content. You know there's some stale content that hasn't changed, that's already organized from the last time you migrated, so that's going to use a very simple migration technique, but you may have some site collections that need to be broken up or some site collections that need to be combined. They're going to require a different technique. So the SharePoint migration tool is part of your process. So Lori clarified in the chat room that they announced it at Ignite 2017, and yes, they have been constantly improving it. They've been adding bits and bits and bits. This month, they added a very important bit. They added the ability to script migration jobs with PowerShell. And that was the big news that they announced on July 2nd. And part of that was they got user voice feedback. Microsoft is serious about user voice. So if you've got a complaint or a feature request for a Microsoft product, you can't go wrong with user voice. So that was one of the things that they did, and you vote those up, and that gives them an idea what things they could work on, and this was one of them. And so now you can create migration tasks and then schedule them and start them and stop them and all that through PowerShell with this tool. So that is a great thing. This will be very handy for customers that have large amounts of data that do fall under the thing that the SharePoint migration tool does, and so they don't have to stand there and sit there at their workstations and off hours clicking next, or have the college interns do it, things like that. So if you've been using the SharePoint migration tool, by all means, go out there and check it out. See if the PowerShell things help you out. I think this is great. I love PowerShell, so I love to see more tools integrating PowerShell into them. This next article is one that I didn't know I needed until I saw it. So a couple of months ago, Microsoft announced that they were changing all the document versions for everything in SharePoint Online. So you get 100 versions of this and 100 versions of that, and they upgraded everybody's storage capacities to manage that. We all know that in reality that was done in the back end for things like the files restore. So if you get hit by malware, they know that they have a lot of versions of things in the background. And so that was good. But kind of a tangential thing was if you install your Office clients, so Word, Excel, all that, from your Office 365 license, and everything is Office 365 one way and out the other and all that, your clients have the option of turning on autosave. So when you're using the web client for Word and Excel, obviously it autosaves because it's in the browser. But then when you get back to the FAT client, there's that whole thing that you forget to save and Windows doesn't update like mine did last night and reboots. Potentially you can lose content. So the FAT clients, Word and Excel, if they're wired up to Office 365, have autosave built in. So you don't have to worry about that. That is good. And I thought it was great when it came out. I lauded it. And again, I thought there was nothing bad about it until I heard some people talking about this. And then it occurred to me that there is one glaring problem with that. A lot of times when I'm creating a new document, it is based on an old document. So if I'm invoicing a customer, there's a chance that I'm just taking the previous invoice that I made for them, opening that up, changing the things, saving it out as the new invoice, and then sending it on to them. Now with autosave, when I open up the old document and start making changes, if I don't rename it right away, it's going to save over top of the old one, except I'm not going to know. So I'm going to think I have one set of documents somewhere, but in reality, I'm going to have a different set because I opened the old one up, made some changes, finessed it, and in the background, Word is very, very diligently auto-saving all those changes, but I don't think it's doing it because I'm not doing it manually. So this was an article. So I hadn't really thought about that aspect of autosave until somebody brought it up, and they're like, "Oh, this autosave is terrible." Like, what are you talking about? Autosave's great. And then they threw out this scenario that I'd been doing ever since autosave came out, and I went, "Oh yeah, that's terrible." So I read an article, and I don't remember when this article came out, and it doesn't have the date on it, but how to manage around that. So basically calling out this particular scenario that I had not even thought about, and then talking about how to manage autosave around that. And what's funny about that is Microsoft kind of tells this fun story about, you get this audience and blah, 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 and these people working in the office, and the person that the persona that they use as the person who's screwing up and wanting to make copies is Todd. So that's kind of fun. Now I wonder, so I'm logged in as me. I wonder if that changes if you log in as somebody else. But anyway, it's how to leverage this autosave activity without impacting that original file that you're making a copy of, because it turns out everybody does the thing that I do where you open up the old document. Yep. And so Lori in the chat room is saying the same thing happened to her. She opened up somebody else's document, was reading through it, going to make some changes, save it as her own, and she overwrote those. So yeah, it's a problem that I didn't know I had until somebody told me that I had it, and now I'm glad that there's a solution for it. So if you're using autosave, and you should, because it's a great way to keep from losing things, make sure you understand what's happening in the background and all these have. So now I'm nervous. Now I need to go back and look at all my documents and see how many documents I've destroyed that I didn't realize that I had destroyed. So I'm curious, chat room, somebody open up that document, make sure that, at the top that they're logged in to support.office.com, and see if it says, if the person in the story is Todd or if the person in the story is your name, because it never occurred to me that they know who I am. So they may have just put my first name in there. But kudos to Microsoft for adding this functionality and then, figuring out that use case and that problem and fixing it for us. All right. So we are coming up without Shane's blathering and just nearly valueless, addition to the podcast. We're able to plow through this. So I've gotten through all the topics that I need. Lori is chiming in that it still says that I'm the guy that's destroying. So that's good. I'm glad that worked. I'm glad I didn't miss that. So that is all of the topics that I had. I did want to give a shout out to some community events. SharePoint Saturday Charlotte is August 11th. So head on down there, SPS Charlotte. Lots of fun stuff there. Wish I could make it busy that weekend. And then SharePoint Saturday New England is October 20th in Burlington, Massachusetts. You can't go wrong going to the American Northeast in the fall. The change of the leaves is just so perky. I did a SharePoint Saturday out there a few years ago, 5 years ago, and just so picturesque. It's just like a painting. Love it. So if you're going to be around SharePoint Saturday New England, October 20th, please go to that. And then for promotional events, Shane's going to be at the Business Application Summit on the 22nd through the 24th out in Redmond. So that is his excuse for not being at the podcast here, I think, in a couple of weeks, because he's going to be flying back on that Wednesday. So we may move it that week because I am busy on the 25th as well. So we may have to move the podcast that week because we both have excuses. And then we will both be at SP TechCon in a month. And then Lori says that there are SharePoint Saturdays in LA and Twin Cities they're starting to organize, and Denver. So if you're part of either of those groups, let me know and I'll give you a shout out. I know the SharePoint Saturday Twin Cities is normally around the end of October because they have done a great job They do, and that's a massive SharePoint Saturday. Holy cow, one of the biggest. They have 2 SharePoint Saturdays a year. They have so much SharePoint Saturday-ness in Minneapolis and St. Paul that they have to do it. They have to release it twice a year. They can't hold it and only do it once a year like most places. But unfortunately, they always do one in April and one in October, and it's always the weekend around one of my kids' birthdays and my anniversary. So I'm always busy. But those are fine events. Hundreds of fanatic SharePoint fans show up to those events all the time. You should go to one if you're going to be around. And I will try to get those added to the notes for next week. So thanks, chat room. We had a bunch of fighting going on with technology. My cable modem was fighting me and all that, but you guys stuck with me, and we made it happen, and I appreciate that. I will stick around for a few minutes in the chat room, hang out with everybody. Thanks, everybody, and one of us will see you next week. I'm not sure which one it was, and we'll figure out something in the next couple of weeks. And let us know what. So we're, again, trying to make some improvements to the podcast. So let us know if it's not on a platform you're looking at or it doesn't work well on a platform. We got it on TuneIn so that we could listen to it in our cars and all that, but there's still some tweaking that we need to do. So give us a shout out. I'm Todd at toddclint.com, an email, or at toddclint on Twitter. Shane is at Shane's Cows on Twitter, or Shane at powerapps911.com for the email. But let us know, if there's something we can do to make this easier for you to consume. We would love to do it. So thanks, everybody. Have a good week. Oh, Lori's thinking about doing SharePoint Saturday Twin Cities. I might have to break my, I've never done one. I might have to do one. Meme time. Who is the subject of your meme, Ollie? I like it. Well, so let me look at my schedule for November. I will find the weekends in November that I can't do it, and that is when they will have it. No, so I'm not. It might actually work. Do the machine learning one, Ollie. I like that one. Oh, where's the machine learning one that I really like? I'm almost afraid to search for images on the internet. So it didn't show up with Bing. I'm going to be very disappointed if Google gets it right away. No. So it's apparently not as common of a machine learning meme as I thought it was. This is the one. Freaking platypus. Ruins everything. Mammals don't lay eggs, except the platypus. Ugh. All right, folks, I'm going to kill the stream. I discovered this morning that the SSL cert for my website expired at midnight, and I need to go chase that down. I discovered it about 2 minutes before I went online with you all, so I'm going to kill the stream here and fight that for a little bit before I head to lunch. Thanks, everybody. Keep the memes going in the chat room, Holly. I like many of them. Oh, there's an okay. So the backend developer reminded me of another one I got to put up now. The show does seem to be better without Shane. All right, folks, gonna kill the stream. Thanks, everybody. Somebody will see you next week or the week after. We'll figure something out.